Why are we looking at peace negotiations and the issue of sexual violence? One reason is because sexual violence hasn't been mentioned very often in peace deals and in peace agreements. Out of 300 peace accords addressing conflict situations in 45 countries since the end of the Cold War, and remember, these are components of peace accords, the ceasefire agreement, chapters on truth and reconciliation, chapters on justice, and so on. Out of 300 of these, just 18 in the last 20 years have mentioned sexual violence, and that's been for 10 conflict-related situations. And 6 of those are ceasefire arrangements. Does it matter whether sexual violence is mentioned or not? Well, as you all know, sexual violence is a feature of all conflicts to some measure. But in some conflicts, certainly in the past 20 years, but this is also prevalent before, there is evidence of highly organized, in other words, systematic sexual violence. One of the strongest examples is, of course, the rape camps of Bosnia. But also there's evidence of extremely widespread sexual violence, and that may be caused by all kinds of things, not necessarily organized, but bubbling up from the grassroots as a way of compensating for low pay and so on. Nevertheless, it's a command responsibility. As General Patton said in World War II, now that the fighting has started, the raping is going to start. As soon as the raping starts, I should like to know about it, because you're going to hear about the hangings.
Impunity should be really taken on. It cannot be that those perpetrators, you have big fish and small fish, but that those perpetrators are still walking around, are still being promoted or taken in the new armies, etc., and that the victims are still witnessed and are working or are forced to work with those perpetrators.
I bring to this press conference the voice of, if I may say, the voice of the voiceless, women who most often during peace negotiation tend to forget their issues. Going back to the Liberian peace talks, as much as we were engaged in activism and advocacy and really had the issues at our fingertip, we failed to raise the issue of sexual violence, not because it wasn't a big issue, because if you look at statistics in Liberia, 3 out of 4 women were raped. 90% of women in Liberia suffer sexual or physical violence during the war. So the question is then, how did these women advocate, develop documents, and never talked about sexual violence? And one of the main issues was ensuring that the peace process went on smoothly. No one wanted to tilt the table, no one wanted to rock the boat, as they say. Everyone wanted this process to go on smoothly. The second reason was because of the language. No one could find the politically correct language to describe sexual violence so as not to offend the perpetrators, who were the main negotiators at the table.
Of all of the horrors I saw in my watch in the UN, in the Red Cross, and many other places that I worked, and in all of the wars that I visited, the most haunting outrage was the sexual abuse against women. We met women that had been gang raped by militia groups for weeks. They were physically and mentally destroyed. And there were not 1 or 2 or 5, they were thousands. In the eastern part of Congo, in Darfur, northern Uganda, Ivory Coast, many other places. I think it may be one of the biggest conspiracies of silence of history, this, because it has continued up until this day. In the peace process, the one thing the two sides, or the many sides, seem to agree on is that let's not touch it, because we're all having had our hands bloodied and dirtied by this.